Hello and welcome. Today I get the privilege to be out of the office and scouting some of the row crops that we've got just about ready for harvest. As you can see, this corn's got just a little ways to go, but it won't be long. We all know the chaos that the fall season brings, both with harvesting these row crops and trying to get that wheat in the ground for next summer. Now, we just came off a great wheat harvest, both in terms of test weight and yield. But what I'm going to do today is head back in the studio and have a conversation with one of our agronomy staff members, Anna Klein, about what made that harvest so great and how we can replicate that going into the 2021 wheat harvest. All this and more coming up on today's PAC Talk. Hello and welcome to PAC Talk, your source for all the information you need to make your farming operation successful in today's agricultural landscape. I'm your host, Chris Kreifels, IT Director here at Progressive Ag Co-op. I'm joined today by Anna Klein of our agronomy staff, and we're happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Today what we'd like to discuss is wheat. As we look toward the season to sow wheat, we look back to June, where we harvested one of the best yielding crops we've had in quite some time here in South Central Kansas. And what we'd like to kind of discuss first is what are the factors that led up to last year's wheat crop being so good?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that led up to wheat doing so well this last year. One being environmental conditions. We had the rains at the right timing for the wheat to yield so well. Another thing is choosing the variety that is suited best for this area. There is a book that you can look at, or you can get online to see what seed wheat is suited best for each area in Kansas. And then also the applying your fungicide to control against disease and insects.
So as I recall, we had a fairly wide coverage of a fungicide program last year, which really does help those yields. And we found that in numerous studies, even here in Sumner County. So we touched briefly on seed selection. Let's discuss a little more in depth the varieties that tended to do well last year and that seem to be popular moving into sowing this year in Sumner, Harper, and Kay counties.
Last year, most wheat varieties that were planted around Wellington did very well. The most high yielding ones that did well around here, around Wellington per se, was Bob Dole, Larry, and Zenda or Everest. And then around Danville was Double Stop, Bob Dole, and Gallagher, with the smaller amounts of wheat planted. Those were the most popular that did very well last year. This year I've been hearing guys looking for Bob Dole, Smith's Gold, and then Larry around the Wellington area. And then of course around the Danville area, they really like the Double Stop Clearfield wheat is what they use over there.
So we touched on those new seed wheat varieties that do well here in the area. And whether we're using those new varieties or whether we're using bend wheat, which is an important part of our planting program as well, we need to make sure we're treating that seed. And we've heard about seed treatments for some time. Why do we treat seed? Why do we treat our wheat going into the ground?
The importance of seed treatments cannot be overemphasized. So we use seed treatments to prevent against fungal pathogens and insects.
So as far as fungal pathogens, we're talking about seed-borne pathogens and soil-borne pathogens, correct?
Correct.
And what are some of those that will affect us moving into our stand that are going to prohibit us from having that good yield?
Yeah, so some examples of the fungal pathogens are smut, seed rots, septoria disease, the damping off, the root rot, the foot rot, and then the powdery mildew and the rust.
Right. And those are all things that are going to directly affect your yield. And the reason we say it's twofold is because we also want to do some protection against insect damage, correct?
Correct. The insects that we're trying to control are the aphids, wireworms, and the later on in the wheat would be the Haitian fly.
So we're not just talking about protection directly on the seed itself, but it's actually going into the plant, protecting the seedling as it grows, which will give us more residual moving forward.
Correct.
Great. So we've got our seed cleaned. We've got it treated. What about the soil? How do we get that soil ready to give us the best yield potential that we can as we move into sowing season?
Yeah. We need to see what NPK, nitrogen, phosphate, potash, and then also there's a few micronutrients that are important for wheat is zinc and sulfur. See what your soil already has. So do a soil sample. It's very simple. $20 for a soil sample to pull it. And it'll tell you exactly what you need to get your soil ready to plant wheat.
So the way I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's a couple different options we have as far as soil sampling. We have a composite sample, which is your basic. That's your one test across the entire field. That's going to give us a good idea of what the field looks like. And that's crucial because the old way of Granddad always put on 75 pounds of nitrogen, so that's what I'm going to do, is just not working anymore. It's not going to give us that high yielding wheat that we really need to make it in today's economic environment. So we need to have an idea of what's going on in that soil, but we also have grid sampling, which will allow us a better view. And what that does is breaks the field up into either 5 or 2.5 acre grid sections, which gives us a lot better idea of what's going on in that field. The difference between the bottom ground or the top of the hill, which will allow variable rate application, which is really going to save us those dollars as far as making sure we're not putting on fertilizer where we don't need it.
Right.
So we have that program available here at Progressive Ag, and any of our agronomy staff welcome to, or more than happy to discuss that with you. So what are our needs? That's the real question. So we've tested our soil. What are our needs? What do we need to make sure that we're putting down with our planting in the fall? We know we're going to come back in the spring and probably top dress, and we'll cover our top dress and our fungicides and what we're going to do in the spring in a later episode. But what are our fertilizer needs right now to get us started and get us through the winter?
Yeah. The overall view of to make a bushel of wheat, the golden rule is 1.5 to 2 pounds of nitrogen during that stage within those 9 months of the wheat growth. So normally most farmers put out 30 to 40 pounds of nitrogen at planting, and then later they will come back and top dress.
So that covers our nitrogen, but it seems to me that our phosphate levels are going to be more important than nitrogen going into the planting season to really get that plant out of the ground, correct?
Correct.
So what are we looking to put down as far as our phosphate levels going into sowing wheat?
Yeah, the phosphate aspect of raising wheat is put on 30 pounds of actual phosphate, which gives us about 70 to 80 pounds per acre. Most farmers usually apply DAP, which is 1846, or MAP 1152 with their dry nitrogen, or they apply it on with their drill.
Right. So we need to make sure we got that phosphate. We're going to split that application of nitrogen to make sure that we get that extra boost in the spring when we're really going to be filling those heads and putting those berries on the plant. But the crucial things we need to take from this are making sure that we have some sort of soil sample. That $20, as little as that $20 investment with a composite sample is going to speak volumes and go a long way in making sure we get that yield that we really are looking for.
Yeah,
out of our wheat.
It'll save you money in the long run.
Absolutely. So we've got our soil ready. Our seed is picked. what about planting? What are our soil populations we're looking at? We're mostly dry land here in south central Kansas, north central Oklahoma. What are our seed populations we're looking at to make sure that we can find that happy medium?
Most usually the dry land seed populations, anywhere from 600 to 900,000 seeds, right at a bushel to a bushel and a half per acre is what you want to plant.
Right. That seed population is crucial because if we overpopulate, then we're decreasing our yield, but also if we underpopulate, we're decreasing our yield as well. So finding that happy medium is crucial. There's one more step I'd like to really touch on, and that's crop protection. We know we're going to go back again in the spring, and we'll talk about that in a later episode, but we know we're going to go back and do something later as far as our finesse and keeping those weeds out. But what do we need to do to make sure that we have good weed control moving into planting and getting us through the winter until we hit the spring?
Yeah, so you need to make sure you've got a clean slate. And a clean slate meaning you want your ground to be clean. Whether you work it with a disc or no-till guys, you want to make sure you have it sprayed, all the weeds and the volunteer killed. And you can do that with a simple burn down. You can also apply your 1/4 ounce finesse ahead of planting, which will give you those extra, 30 to 60 days to keep it clean. And then when you come back and top dress, then you can hit it with the other amount of finesse.
Yeah, just making sure that we don't have those weed pressures pushing in on our crop as we're trying to move forward and getting us through the winter until we can really attack this thing in the spring and drive that yield up. So that wraps up our discussion of sowing wheat and the things we need to look at to get that high yielding crop at harvest time. I hope you'll join me next time when I sit down with Rusty Moorhead, our CEO. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter using the handle @ProAgCoop. We'd like to hear from you and what you thought of today's discussion. Leave us a comment or send us an email at pactalk@proagcoop.com. Hope you hit that like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos just like this one. Do you have a question you'd like the PAC Talk team to answer, or a specific topic you'd like us to cover in an upcoming episode of PAC Talk? Shoot us an email with your requests and we'll do our best to get you the answers you need. Again, that's pactalk@proagcoop.com. Ryan and Anna of our agronomy staff are always willing to help you with any other questions you might have, so we hope you'll get in touch with them. Anna, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
PAC Talk is a production of the Progressive Ag Co-op media team. It's the vision of Progressive Ag Co-op to build successful partnerships with our patrons, employees, and all we do business with to ensure both Progressive Ag Co-op and our patrons' businesses are sustainable in this ever-changing agricultural landscape. Thank you for joining us today. Have a good day.